I'm Jonathan Altmans, and I'm president of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, and very proud to be joining everybody today during this week, Global Entrepreneurship Week. Today, as you know, we are having a discussion around military-connected entrepreneurship, vitally important to the health and the progress of our entrepreneurial ecosystems, is to smooth the path, remove the barriers, and make it possible for more members of the military and their families to participate in the exciting, pioneering, and entrepreneurial journey that so many of us have benefited from. So this week, Global Entrepreneurship Week, is about trying to inspire more citizens, not just here in the United States, but around the world, to consider the path of entrepreneurship. We all know that entrepreneurs are the primary job creators of our economies. In fact, almost all net new jobs come from firms less than 5 years old in nearly 40% of the economies around the world. But they're also our innovators, and they are also perhaps most well-equipped to deal with these challenging times. Entrepreneurs are used to a lack of predictability. They're used to finding new solutions, to forming teams, to figuring out better ways of doing things. And at a time when our world has been dramatically shaken by a pandemic, I can't think of others that I would rather have on my team to be serving next to as we look to try to rebuild our economies and to regenerate many of those lost jobs. So why is this Global Entrepreneurship Week? Well, just let me emphasize how important it is that we look at this through a global lens. You know, this pandemic was tailor-made for a global healthcare response, but I don't think it got one. And so I think when it comes time for us to look at how we address the 2021 exiting of this pandemic, as we look to try to help particularly small businesses, but all of our economies to recover, we should take a global response. You know, our national boundaries are as porous to innovation and ideas as they are to the coronavirus. There's no reason why, if we had one common enemy to the planet, that we shouldn't have had one common response. And we all know, and particularly those of you who've been served your country as part of the military know best that we do things better when we work together as a team. So during Global Entrepreneurship Week, we're seeing 40,000 events, 180 countries. We're seeing an effort to try to reach out to many groups that have historically been not well represented in the entrepreneurship success story. We'll be seeing competitions, a wide range of activities to do with generating engagement in better understanding what it means to start and scale a company. But most importantly, this is about inclusion, because at the end of the day, our economies suffer if we leave people out. So we're working together to really reach out and to listen better as to what are the reasons that some communities have not joined in this great entrepreneurial experiment that, of course, the United States is known so well for. But as we embark upon the future, there will be great opportunities. And I think, as you'll hear from Elizabeth and the team at Hello Alice, there is some optimism out there in the surveys they've conducted that, ironically, I don't think we were expecting this. People are feeling good about next year. While we endure great suffering this year, we have reason that we can be part of a positive 2021. And I think in that regard, I want to strongly encourage all members of the military families and military members to consider the role that you could play that is unique. You bring unique value at a time when there's nervousness and uncertainty and a lack of predictability. You're trained well for these kinds of circumstances. And I cannot think of a better time that the world should not be reaching out to you and helping you to learn some of the additional skills you need, skills that are brought to you by organizations like Bunker Labs and others that we'll talk about today. But this is the time when we could really do with your leadership, we could do with your help. And I really hope that we can do with the fact that you've often been trained to be global at the outset as we look to rebuild our economies. And I'll leave you with one last thought before I turn over to our panel. And that is that just remember that entrepreneurship is not just something of commercial significance. What it really represents for those of us who are in this field, in my case with the Global Entrepreneurship Network, trying to help people everywhere from all walks of life, is that it's about the possibility of endeavor for the benefit of all. Most of the people that Hello Alice and Jen get to work with, and Bunker Labs I know too, they don't get involved in this just because they're looking to make a profit. They get involved in it first and foremost because they want to be able to help others. Yes, they're happy to help themselves and their families at the same time. This is really about building a better future together for all of us. So on behalf of all of the nations, all of the partners, the Ewan Marion Coffin Foundation, which is the funder behind Global Entrepreneurship Week, Hello Alice and Bunker Labs and all of the teams you're going to hear today, I want to say thank you for joining us. And I'm very pleased to have you with us during this Global Entrepreneurship Week event. So please let me introduce someone that doesn't need an introduction to this audience, Elizabeth Gore, the founder and CEO of Hello Alice.
Thank you, Jonathan. Howdy, everyone. Welcome to Global Entrepreneurship Week. It's been a week of optimism, which, excuse me, I think we all needed at this time. I'm so proud to be one of the founders at Hello Alice, and our job is to help small business owners launch and grow. And right now, during this tough pandemic, we say survive and thrive, which is okay right now to say. And the day we launched in 2017, we made a significant commitment to the military community. As a daughter of an Air Force veteran turned entrepreneur, and hi, Dad, I think he's on right now, Mike McKee, he's an amazing entrepreneur and great daddy. We really felt like it was critical to be more accessible to our U.S. veterans, military spouses, active duty, and ensure that they have the resources they need to scale their businesses. And I'm really proud to say that at this time on Hello Alice, we help 300,000 owners a week, and a big chunk of that are our military connected entrepreneurs, which we're so proud of. So today we're going to have a great, robust discussion about what's the future look like for our military connected entrepreneurs, and how can we support them. And we have three extraordinary experts, entrepreneurs, and leaders that I would love to introduce. Charlinda Scales, she is an Air Force veteran. So actually we have a really heavy Air Force panel today. And you know, just because I grew up in an Air Force family doesn't mean they're the best, but maybe they are. Okay. Anyway, Charlinda is also an amazing entrepreneur of Mutt Sauce, which I can't wait to hear more about, but she's coming out of Ohio. Charlinda, could you introduce yourself and share a bit about your story?
Sure thing, Elizabeth. Thank you all for having me here. It's an honor to serve. It's an honor to be on this panel. I am originally from Tennessee. I'm a Tennessee country girl. I was transplanted into Dayton, Ohio because of my military service. I served over 10 years. I'm now a reservist in the United States Air Force Reserves at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. My background is acquisitions program management. I'm also an entrepreneur. So this journey this year, when entrepreneurs are talking about the tough time that they're having because of COVID and having to start their companies over, I just want you to know that I am right here with you on this journey. So I'm going to give you the perspective of someone who's in the thick of it with you. In March of this year, I was in the third trimester of my pregnancy, gave birth on March 7th, and then the very next week they announced the pandemic. And so here I am with a brand new baby, and all of the events I had planned for my revenue for my company were shut down. So I had to start over. And I can tell you from the perspective of starting your company over and rebuilding from the ground up and using those military resources and the things that you learned on active duty to get you going.
Wow. Charlinda, the baby, my goodness, babies, business, and battlefield. I mean, you're an incredible leader. My goodness. Sabrina, I'm so happy to welcome you and our friends at Bunker Labs. Bunker Labs is an extraordinary organization that Sabrina will talk about, but I just want to stress that if you're a high growth company that is really looking for support and you're in the military community, you have to look up Bunker Labs. And Sabrina has been an innovator, entrepreneur, and leader in that organization. She is daughter of Air Force, wife of Army, is that right, or Marine?
Marine.
Marine, sorry, Sabrina, Marine. So welcome, Sabrina.
Yes, thanks for having me, Elizabeth. I'm really excited to be here celebrating Global Entrepreneurship Week. And, you know, we really didn't know it when we launched into building Bunker Labs, but post World War II, 49% of veterans went on to own or operate businesses. And today that's just around 4 or 5%. So we're really focused on the mission of inspiring, equipping, and connecting the military community with the resources they need to succeed. My husband, as you mentioned, served in the Marine Corps and transitioned out looking for his next opportunity, his next challenge, and landed in entrepreneurship, starting a company with somebody he had reached out to be his mentor, and was able to successfully make that transition and build the company. I joined his second venture. They built together, actually, same two owners, and both were acquired by a Fortune 200 company in Houston back in 2014. So coming from a place of entrepreneurship, transition from the military to entrepreneurship, we've really been strong advocates of this path for our service members and their family members. So I'm excited to be here and share that and help answer and inspire any of you that we can.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. It's my pleasure to introduce someone who I have grown very close to over the last year, Keith Schotz. Keith was a career Air Force leader, and now I call him the super connector. Vista Equity Partners is one of the largest PE firms in the country and led by Robert Smith. And Keith is not only a leader within the company, but also ensuring that women, people of color, and other minorities have success both in their education and in entrepreneurship. So Keith, welcome.
Well, thanks, Elizabeth. I didn't know Charlene and I both started or had history back in Dayton, Ohio, because that's where I did my military training, at Dayton, Ohio, back in the early 80s. So good connection. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Just a little bit about my background that probably Elizabeth has heard and others over time. While I did spend a large amount of time in the military, while I was in the military, I was exploring entrepreneurship while I was in. I recognized that my career in the military, I was not in a uniform for most of the time because I was in the intelligence community, and I didn't fit well within the Air Force because I was more entrepreneurial than the system would allow. And so I did a lot of entrepreneurial work while I was in the military. One of the things that I did that was really helpful for me is I developed a large number of, as Elizabeth says, connections. And so while I was in the military, people that I was in the military with, we started joint ventures together, buying real estate, businesses, and the things while we were in. And also, like Shalinda, I was also in acquisition for the entire time. And I honed my skills on how to build contracts, how to do business development, how to do contracting while I was in the Air Force, because I knew when I got into the Air Force, I was going to probably be more entrepreneurial than not. And that's kind of the path that I took. So when I left the military, I had the opportunity to work for a small firm that allowed me to be an entrepreneur inside the firm. And so I got to build an IT practice inside of another company. And they gave me the authority to do everything I needed to, from talent to business development. And during that time frame, and I'll give you all insight in terms of how we did it, but during that time frame, seven contracts awarded to an organization that didn't exist before I got there. It went from one person to 60 people in a 6-year time frame, and that's when I had my exit out of the firm to go to where I am now, which is Vista Equity Partners out of Austin, Texas. So I'm glad to be here and looking forward to the discussion and being able to help all those on the call as much as we can.
Great, thank you, Keith. And I'm glad to see everyone introducing themselves in the chat. Please continue to do so. Also, later we'll be answering questions from the chat, so you can start putting those in there and I'll read them. And then finally, I wanted everyone, while you're here, to also check out all of us collectively help support the military connected community on Hello Alice. And we have great partners there like Bunker Labs. I saw Patrick Alcorn is on from Business Beyond the Battlefield. The United States Veterans Chamber of Commerce is a part of it, as well as the Association of Military Spouse Entrepreneurs and the Veteran Women's Enterprise Center. So please check out the Military Connected community on Hello Alice. It's a wonderful resource to find grants, funding, accelerators, and also these frontline organizations who are the best. So let's jump in. Charlinda, I want to start with you. You know, my goodness, how did you pivot in the middle of this pandemic? And you know, the baby part just blows my mind, so we can come back to that. But I really want to understand with Mutts as a business what you had to do, and so other people can learn from it.
Yes. So I tell people I'm a product of mentoring and accepting help and listening to people who are more experienced me in different areas. You have to take your ego out of it. That's the first part of entrepreneurship. You can't go into it thinking that you can do it all or know it all. I was originally mentored by SCORE, and they helped me start my business. Over time, I grew this relationship with Bunker Labs that connected me to things like the Chase events, where you could learn about how to move forward with your business model. I learned last year that my business model was 90% retail and in-person events and 10% e-commerce. And I was chastised for that by some of the executives they introduced me to. They said, if you're going to survive going forward as a business, you can scale a lot better if you make the move to e-commerce and really put your energy there. Well, I was stubborn and I didn't listen. And so what happened in March was I have no choice. I'm looking at my phone and seeing cancellations of everything that I've booked from that next month to the end of the year. Everything was canceled. And that's when I had to make the pivot and listen to what my advisors had already told me and go back, and I call it YouTube University. I would watch YouTube videos. I went back. Damon John has a Damon on Demand. I went to Damon on Demand and watched that. I did everything I could possibly do to become a student of e-commerce and my business. I took the time to see where every penny was going in my business. What should I stop spending money on? What do I need to invest my money in? And how do I scale it up via e-commerce? And one thing that I noticed when I made the pivot was June. June was a record month. I looked at our finances and we made more in the month of June than we normally do in 6 months. So.
And Charlotte, if I may, what is there's a lot of things go into that, but what was the number one attribution to that jump?
So to scale it, I had to go from I had to go to e-commerce. And the thought was meet people where they are. You're serving someone, you're serving that customer. Where are they? They're at home. Their shopping habits are not going to change dramatically in the next few years. So you have to adapt to your customer versus having your customer adapt to you.
That's great advice. Keith, I'm curious, of all your portfolio companies, what are the most successful pivots you've seen, like Charlinda's?
Yeah, I mean, for those that are not as familiar, Vista Equity Partners, we're primarily enterprise software. It scales. To Charlinda's point, most of what we do is B2B, right? And all of those software companies, bless you, Sabrina, all of those companies actually scale. And there were some that we had that did a large amount of planning activities for large events. Well, when all the large events go away, then of course they had to pivot. So they pivoted and Zoom became a common characteristic of what they wound up doing, just like we're doing here, as opposed to in-person types of activities. So they started relying on technology more heavily in terms of interacting with their customer base, which, as Charlinda mentioned, is a good path as we start going down this path of COVID. So that was the big thing. They pivoted toward making use of software. And there is a big deal with regard to tutoring and mentoring. In the context of what people are trying to do, I always found it very helpful to find people who have figured out the way to make it work. whether it be a COVID type of situation, or how do you increase sales, or how do you cut costs? Because one of my primary responsibilities at Vista is working with our portfolio companies to work on those two sides. And as part of that, this recent pandemic and all the other social unrest, we've been doing a great deal of work getting our companies certified either as minority-based firms or veteran-owned firms, such that they could take advantage of the opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be available to them. As an example, we actually did an internal survey to find out how many of our portfolio companies actually had business with companies that actually gave preference to companies who were certified. A lot of them had just that, but they didn't get their certification. So one of those areas that they could have gotten added score for, I'm an acquisition person, contracts. A lot of these contracts actually give you increased scoring if you fall within one of these categories. And a lot of companies just don't take advantage of that type of opportunity. So I'd strongly suggest that for those who can, take advantage of those opportunities that identify you as either veteran-owned, female-owned, minority-owned, because there are actually other opportunities that become available only to those who fit in that category. And those companies that are in the billion-dollar roundtable, those firms that spend $1 billion per year in their diverse supply chain are looking for you. But if they can't find you because you haven't hit one of these certifications, you can't take advantage of opportunities that they're going to do in terms of providing those types of opportunities to you. So that's kind of thing. Take advantage of technology and take advantage of who you are, because there are a lot of businesses that are working to find companies that don't inject risk into their supply chain, which is probably many of the people that are on the call.
And Keith, what are a couple of organizations that you would point to get that certification?
One of those that we work with, we're out of Boston, we work pretty closely with Karen Box, who's the president of the Southwest Minority Supplier Development Council. But there's a council in each one of the regions across the country. And if you reach out to either the national organization, Adrian Trimble at the National Minority Supplier Development Council, or one of the regional offices, they can actually tie you into the system. And once you're in the system, you have access to online training, you have access to both personal as well as virtual events, and you have access to these companies that want to find those firms who can actually help them in their supply chain as part of what they're already doing. So National Minority Supplier Development Councils, as well as all the local chambers of commerce and so forth, would actually help in that regard.
Very helpful. Thank you, Keith. And on your software point, please, Sabrina, go ahead.
I see somebody put in the chat that they're in the process and it takes longer than anticipated. I would underscore that point. Anticipate it before you need it and get the process going. It does take time for certifications and getting access and then putting in proposals for all of these opportunities. So the earlier you can get in to get that process started, the better off you will be.
And I want to come back to you, Sabrina, but let me just say really quickly, we did a survey of 110,000 business owners. And it was really interesting because 90% of them cut spending in 2020, except for one area, and it was software. They increased their spend on software, and then the majority of them plan to continue to increase that software in 2021. So it is obviously, I know we're all trying to cut costs right now, but I think it's very wise to increase the ability to be more efficient with your digital transformation. Sabrina, I want to also ask the pivot question to you and what y'all have seen and how Bunker Labs is even supporting those pivots within this 2020 crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely interesting and heartbreaking to see early on when you had the shutdown. Obviously, the restaurant industry got hurt and affected pretty badly. We have a lot of founders in the military community that had restaurants, bars, breweries, that kind of thing. But something really interesting pivot-wise that we saw was those alcohol producing businesses pivoting into producing sanitizers. Wow. And so that was an amazing outcome for a lot of them to be able to take on some opportunities to produce the sanitizers locally. Some of them got national distribution. I'm sure a lot of them will and have gone back to producing their beverages, but for some of them, I think it's been a permanent change too. So that's just one thing. Also in the manufacturing space, we saw a lot of pivots to making personal protection equipment. In one of our companies, Re3D, definitely saw an uptake in the opportunity to 3D print PPE as well. So I know that was a recurring theme across the network in the US too.
And looking forward to 2021, Charlinda, you've obviously made a very wise pivot with the increase in sales that you did. What are you with Mutts? What are you looking for next year, and how are you planning for the unknown? Because none of us really truly know where we're heading in 2021. I mean, how are you doing that, and what is your advice to owners as they try to unpack or build some kind of business plan for 2021?
Right. Well, I think this year was a big eye opener for many of us of, do you have emergency funds? Are you planning, what do you do if everything has to get shut down? Can you survive off of what you've made? So a lot of my plan for 2021 is not only trying to maximize the scaling of the business on e-commerce, but putting money away and putting it in places that will have a return on investment and sit there and grow. I'm also looking at how to diversify our sales channels, looking at myself. So you as an entrepreneur are a sales channel. People want to learn from you. People would invest in what you know, and don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate those years of grinding. There is a lot of valuable information in those years. So, and whether it's through public speaking or teaching webinars, you got to find a way that you can continue telling your story and taking care of your family.
It's a very good point. Sabrina, I feel like Bunker does a really good job of that, helping owners and entrepreneurs become their own story. I mean, what is your advice around that? And how do you use networks like Bunker or the National Veterans Association to get out, expand your network, and tell your story?
Yeah, one of the mantras that we have is that people will be who they can see. And so whenever we are interfacing with entrepreneurs in the community, we encourage them to learn who they are, learn how to tell their story, not only so that they can sell and produce results for their own businesses and services, but so that they can utilize it in terms of PR and building their network, pitching themselves to mentors, advisors, board members, and building your own personal board of directors, not just for your company, but for yourself. You can always use the benefit of others that want to invest not just money, but time and as Charlinda said, like knowledge into you. So yes, storytelling is a big part of that. And really what we do is build communities and close the ecosystem access gap to those individuals that are going to help. So that's one of our major focuses. As we did our own pivot this year, we have organized ourselves into two core focus areas, and that's ecosystem building, which we all know and have been involved with the Kauffman Foundation and their theories and opportunities there, and then direct entrepreneur support through our programs. And so that's really been a great opportunity to dig in and learn more about the challenges that the entrepreneurs were facing and come up with the resources that will solve those challenges.
Thank you, Sabrina. I'm going to start pulling questions in as we continue the conversation because there's so many. But Keith, you look like you had a comment. Did you have a comment on that?
Yes, I did. In terms of Sabrina's feedback, Charlinda mentioned it earlier in terms of a mentor. The notion of having a board of advisors or a board of directors, regardless of how large or small a company may be, it's very helpful to have those types of expertise on your kitchen cabinet, right? Because there are some things that you just don't know until you've gone through them. And so having a group of advisors who have been through what you've been through, or who can actually fill in gaps of your team, is actually a very helpful way. So Sabrina's comment was spot on, tied to making certain that you have what looks like a board of advisors or board of directors, regardless of how big or small you are, because they can actually help in terms of moving it forward, provided you listen to the expertise that they're providing.
Very good point. Keith, I'd like to stay with you. We have a great question here from Amy Schweizer, and she says, how do we find companies or corporations that want to specifically sponsor or invest in military businesses?
I'll give an example of one that we actually wound up doing. When I was in D.C., the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, I was actually working for a company that I said I had been a part of. And we went out looking for, because in many cases, a lot of the government contracts have carve-outs for different activities. And so we paid attention to those contracts that were coming out that were consistent with the skills that our firm had. And we actually went and recruited and worked with those to become partners on their contracts, because they needed us. As much as we needed them, they needed a small business that worked with them. Once we grew larger, where we were in a position to do the same thing, we then went and looked to find partners to what we call prop them up, because in many cases we became too big to compete on smaller contracts. So then we turned around and looked for smaller companies that had most of the skills, but they needed to have some of the skills in terms of making that contract successful, and we could provide them. So we did it both ways. When we were smaller, we went and sought out those companies that were bidding on proposals or contracts that needed our skills. And even if we only got 2 or 3, at the time we were just one person. So getting 2 or 3 people was a big deal. And so we went from 2 or 3 people to 7 or 8 people to 15 or 20 people. And then we turned around and paid it forward, so to speak, and started doing the same thing for the smaller companies who were looking for a break as well. And then we started bringing them on board as well. So one is look for those contracts that people are bidding on and partner with people, either directly or indirectly. And then once you get in a position to do the same thing because other people need a break, and you should be willing to do it because somebody did it for you.
Charlinda, have you had success partnering with either distributors or corporations who are specifically looking for veteran-owned?
Yes, I have. I did want to go to Keith's last point about the board of advisors. I do have a board of advisors, and I'll tell you guys, do not look for like-minded people. That's something that I stopped doing in 2019. You have to look for like-hearted people. So whatever your mission and values are for your company, find people who share those values, but are not afraid to tell you that you're doing something wrong, you're headed in the wrong direction, or you just need to get your crap together. So
great advice.
Make sure that because the self-licking ice cream cone, it just doesn't work. It really doesn't work when you have advisors who all agree. But yes, I have worked with so many different organizations, whether it was Bob Evans, I did some work with Damon John, Bunker Labs, SCORE, AMSI, which is the Association of Military Spouse Entrepreneurs. So there's all these different organizations out there, and I made a Google search. That's how I found my initial mentoring. I just put in free help in Google, and that's how I found SCORE. So you do have to put in some work to not only seek them out, but let them know that you're available and let them know what you need. Because if you don't let them know how to help you, then you're going to be stuck.
Yeah, I'll add to that. A lot of organizations or companies rather have supplier diversity programs. And so you can look into getting connected with supplier diversity programs for opportunities in your industry to get new contracts and things like that as well.
Great point, Sabrina. Jonathan, we do have a global audience today, and I just was curious about what is the impact of veterans in other countries and military families in the entrepreneurial landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's consistent with what we have in the United States in the sense that there is demand for finding those or creating those kinds of opportunities after a career in service. But there is not the level of organization that we have in the United States around supporting around military connected families. I mean, as far as we're aware of, in working with some of our teams in other countries, we've not seen actors out there like Bunker Labs and some of the kind of stories that we've got here. I think, but there is a couple of things that I will add in. I mean, I think the first thing, that while I have the mic to emphasize is that everything will change next year. And you can either be terrified about that or you can just be alert to it. And what I mean by change is not just, where are the opportunities going to come for either grants or government contracts, for example, but how are we going to reinvent a whole range of services, products and services in response to probably the biggest and the fastest reshaping of consumer demand that we've ever seen. So we all experienced, of course, the fact that we are now having this much more personal conversation with our laptops, either because we're doing everything on Zoom in our connectivity, or it's because we're talking to our doctors. We've all experienced this shift to e-commerce, to the value of technology. But if you think through one by one all of the changes in demand that's going to occur, because whatever happens, we're never going back to the way we were before. We will have changed consumer opinions. So what I essentially say is you should first, and one of those significant changes, because of the fact that people are more comfortable. I mean, every time you start a Zoom call in our world, we have to first of all say, what country are you in? So as a result, people are a lot more comfortable doing business across borders. So I'd say to everybody with their businesses that has any kind of international potential, you're going to have great opportunities. We're also seeing an increase in angel investing support coming now. It used to be that angel investors didn't invest in markets that they weren't in and they didn't understand. Now they're being able to get educated, much more because of the fact that the norm is to be doing it electronically rather than in person. So I'd certainly argue that, so the first point is remember opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. And remember, I think as we got told, listen to your customers, go to your customers, as I think we've heard on this call. And then the only other quick thing I just add on to this is I can't tell you how much the kind of resilience that naturally comes for someone that served their country in the military comes into play in this time. So you should really capitalize on that, because you're used to operating in a lot more frightening circumstances than what we're in right now. I mean, my father was, I'm a Navy brat, so all my relatives were on the Navy side, balance out the Air Force a little bit. But when I hear the kind of things that my dad went through, ranging from all the way from, at night when he was a 10-year-old boy, he says, we slept in I grew up in England. He's was a Royal Navy Admiral, but he said we were in the underground subways at night, when the bombs were coming. And, when you hear, the kind of challenges we've got, I can't emphasize more. I think it's very important to look for where there are funding opportunities. I think you want to look for where there are consumer opportunities and to be partnering with others in doing that. I think Bunker Labs has done a great job by joining this movement around the United States to come up with healthier entrepreneurial ecosystems, because that's where I think military connected families that don't come from an entrepreneurship background can get used to that culture. It's joining in some of these startup community activities and really beginning to absorb what it's really about to figure out a new way of doing something.
Thank you, Jonathan. Another question here was, it seems like everyone's really leaning into this board of advisors point that both Keith and Charlinda made. But there's several questions of how do I know what I need and where do I even start? And so, Charlinda, let's start with you on that, and then I'd love to throw it to Keith.
I'm gonna give a very blunt military answer. Start with what you suck at. So I look at my weaknesses as an entrepreneur, and I try to make sure that my board is strong where I'm not. So if it's, I grew up, my mom was a single mom, humble beginnings, but financial literacy was something that I learned later in life. And I can't say that I knew it very well. I was very concerned that on the journey of entrepreneurship, that I made wise decisions with money and not impulsive ones because I've never had money. Mm-hmm. And so that was really important to find people who were very financially literate and disciplined that could say, hey, if you win $25,000 from here, let's put it towards your manufacturing because that equates to more cash flow. And we need to make sure you always have cash flow. So you just need those type of people in your circle that can make up for what you lack.
Keith, I'd love to hear your comments.
Mine is very similar to Charlene's. I'll use the example that there was a discussion earlier about mentor. My first mentor, when I was working at AT&T Bell Labs, instructed me why I should buy AT&T from a financial perspective, why I should buy AT&T shares at 17 1/8 when I was in the 9th grade, right? Because I knew at that time, although he was teaching me how to program in C, he was my very first mentor. And he was much more than just a mentor on learning financial literacy. He was across the board. And so from that experience, I started teaching financial literacy. And I think that everyone on the call, in all circumstances in life, if you have advisors who can help you with the financial side, you cannot go wrong. Can't go wrong there. And so if you have someone who can help you on either side of the ledger in terms of how you manage your debt, how do you manage your equity, how you manage your cash flow, if you have someone who can help you on that, you're well above the average in terms of making sure you have a cabinet or a series of advisors or board members. Likewise, in terms of go-to-market kind of expertise and talent, right? Finding good talent in this environment under normal circumstances would be a challenge. But for those who work in the tech space, we don't have all the talent that we need. And so having someone who can get you access or connected to talent along with finances and go-to-market would be 3 places where I think you can't go wrong. Regardless of how you are, you can always get help in terms of identifying, attracting, and maintaining and rewarding talent. People who can help you with your finances and how you get your product or services to market.
Very helpful. And Sabrina and several other people have put articles and pointed to great resources around getting advisors in the chat. So I wanted to flag that. Also, I just wanted to stress the importance of peer-to-peer advisors and mentors. Sometimes the best person to talk to is someone who just went through what you did 3 months ago or 6 months ago. And within Hello Alice and on the Military Connected community, you can search for other business owners by industry, location, if they're affiliated with the military, ethnicity. So I really encourage you all. It's my favorite part of what we do is to encourage you as experts to talk to each other. I want to segue. I worry a lot. A lot of our data is showing that mental health has become a big issue with our owners, and the isolation, and none of us plan to lower sales or pause our business. It is just not in any of our DNA as an entrepreneur, and specifically a military entrepreneur. And so I think one of the best things you can do right now is to connect with another owner, make these decisions together, talk to each other. But I'd love to kind of pull to the softer side of this conversation on how are you all finding community and support to run your businesses, particularly because physically it's very hard right now. And let me start with you, Sabrina, and I'd really love all 3 of you to answer this question.
Yeah, so I think that's something that is very, very obvious in the peer-to-peer programs that we run, is that you have a group of individuals that are going through the same things you are. It's a safe space to talk about the challenges. You can't always talk to your spouse. You can't always talk to your co-founder, and you definitely shouldn't talk to any employees you have. So having a group of peers that you can come to on a weekly or monthly basis to talk about those challenges and hopefully even find some solutions. Like you said, our Veterans in Residence program and our CEO Circle program put together groups of folks that are, you know, right ahead or right behind each other. And so you can find somebody that's probably experienced that particular challenge. Obviously, this is a new landscape for everybody. Nobody's worked through quite a pandemic.
No one's having a great time in 2020.
Yeah,
Okay.
but there's still, there is a little bit of things to be learned from some of the entrepreneurs that went through similar situations while serving or in other business situations too. So
Thank you, Sabrina. Charlene, I'd love to hear your view on this because you're in the thick of it as an owner.
Oh yeah, well, I'm going to give the most transparent account that I possibly can. I will pay respects to Bunker Labs because I'm now a member of a CEO circle called the Consumer Packaged Goods, the CPG CEO circle. And they specifically designed it to be a small number of CEOs in a very specific industry that can talk to each other with relevant on-time advice. So we're all trying to either use this time to get our certifications, or how do we get wholesale accounts because people are going to go back to the store, or how do we help each other with our e-commerce. So we're giving each other that peer-to-peer advice right now, led by, facilitated by someone who is just a giant in the industry, Frank Pollock. So thank you to Bunker Labs for that experience. But what I did notice as a byproduct of being in this situation is that when you start opening up about your businesses, and invariably you start talking about life. And I want to tell the veterans and the military people who are listening to this that your life is greatly impacting your business success, and do not discount the impact of your life on your ability to succeed, whatever success means to you. I felt very connected to a couple of people in there because I finally opened up about the fact that I went through a horrible divorce and I was trying to rebuild my life and keep that separate from my business. But, when you're in that mindset and the state of emotional recovery, you go off on your own, you try to have a baby, it works, and now you're a single mom. And then the pandemic hits. But to hear people say, I've been through that, I know what you're feeling, I'm going to help you, from not only a relevant business standpoint, but a life standpoint, it is so much more of a wholesome experience. So now you don't feel like you're alone. And veterans and military, I'm going to give you a great compliment. You're good at one thing, but it's something that hurts at the same time. You are great at compartmentalization. You are pros at putting stuff in a box and putting it away and getting the mission done. But you have to realize that those boxes are still there and they're piling up. And when you're an entrepreneur, there can be a whole lot of them. And what happens is they can open without warning. So you need to have a circle that understands that you have this, that understands that you have these unique challenges, and can help coach you to not keep it all locked up. And that is what I think Bunker Labs does really, really well, is they put us in these situations where we have safe spaces to open up. And the opening up is what really helps not only us, but eventually helps our business.
Incredible, Charlene. Thank you. Keith, thoughts on this piece?
Peer-to-peer. One of the areas that Robert was a genius at is we have all of our companies are of the same type. They're all enterprise software data companies. Decades ago, the same example that was just given for Bunker Labs, we have that as part of our overall firm. We have these peer-to-peer events where we call them CEO summits, where all the CEOs of all the companies come together, and because they're all in the same industry, they can actually help each other through things because they've already been through it. And that occurs regularly throughout the year. But in addition to these types of activities at the CEO level, we have these best practice summits where we bring together all the talent professionals across the ecosystem. We bring all the development people, the business development people and the like. So you actually have all these experts all within the software area that have common concerns on talent, go-to-market, technology. And we do that on a regular recurring basis to actually bring them into a safe zone because we're all part of the same ecosystem. We're all part of the same company. So by bringing everybody together, you can actually get this economy of scale of learning things you otherwise wouldn't be able to learn or would take you too long to learn. And we actually achieve that by doing the exact same thing. So that's goodness on Bunker Labs for doing that across so many different verticals, as we call it. But within our enterprise software and data, we've done that as a matter of course in terms of bringing together at the CEO level and then bringing together all those functional specialists across the entire ecosystem. So couldn't agree more in terms of having the ability to have experts who are all in the same area trying to overcome the same challenges working together. So outstanding.
Very helpful.
Good on Bunker Labs for that.
You'll have to join one of our groups for enterprise software.
I like it, right? Keith is a master connector, so it should happen. I wanted to answer a very specific question. I think this is really relevant for Charlinda and Keith because you were doing business. But what are specific resources for active duty entrepreneurs?
I like the SkillBridge program. So I also started Mutt-Sauce while I was still on active duty. It's a challenge, but you can do it. The SkillBridge program I just learned about, it's DoD SkillBridge. You can get an active duty person or someone who's transitioning out of the military to intern for you. Wow. So if you need someone to be running around all day doing stuff for you while you're on duty, that's a great way of getting some free help.
Charlinda, say it one more time. SkillBridge?
SkillBridge, yeah.
Okay, SkillBridge, awesome. Keith, do you have a specific active duty resources?
No, I don't have a good active duty because I was on active duty a while ago, right? And while I was on active duty, most of my learning, when I was 12 or 13, was the hard way, right? Most of my learning while I was on active duty was the hard way. We had a couple of us that were captains together, and we decided to get together and go do stuff, and we didn't know that we couldn't do it, and we didn't know who to go look for, so we just stumbled our way through it. And so we didn't have much to add to that beyond what was already added.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Sabrina, did you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I can share within Bunker Labs, one of the resources we have is called Launch Lab Online. And it's an online, at your own pace, virtual module program that identifies if entrepreneurship is for you and if the idea you have is viable. So we help you build what we're calling a me canvas that assesses your personal tolerance, your family's tolerance for entrepreneurship, the financial risks, that kind of thing. And then a business model canvas, which is a modern day one-page business plan to really get you started down the path of building your business. We're encouraging active duty and those that are thinking about their transition up to 18 months in advance to take a look at that program. You can access it from anywhere in the world globally. Just go to bunkeronline.org and go to the courses section. Once you're registered, you can find Launch Lab Online. And then I'd say it's really a focus on building your network. So utilize Hello Alice, utilize LinkedIn, and build your network, I think are some of the best things that active duty folks can do. The biggest gap that you have when you transition is access to a business community network. So get that started as early as possible.
Yeah, one thing to add to Sabrina's comment, Elizabeth, and although I stumbled through it in my early career, as I got later in my career and wanted to do things that were more entrepreneurial, and I knew I was going to do that when I got out, my last job in the military was learning that which I needed to do when I left the military. And so I knew that data centers was going to be a big deal when I was about to get out, data analysis, big data, and the like. So I took my last job was working on an activity, back to Charlinda, back to a program, working on a program that actually did exactly what I wanted to do when I left the military as an entrepreneur. So I got to learn, for lack of a better use of word, I got to learn the players, I got to learn the technology, I got to build my network, such that as I finished my time on active duty, I knew all the people who I would have to interact with, all the companies that did it, all the people who did it, all the consultants, and where all the business opportunities were, because I just left that entire environment as my last job in the military. So one way to do this, if you're on the military on your way and you have time, some 18 months, is see if there's a position you could take on active duty that gets you as close as possible to that type of activity that you would want to do when you left. And since I wanted to be in the same space when I left the military, it was relatively easy to work that type of job, such that I was working on an IT-related project, building data centers for 20 months before I left the military. And so that made the transition a little bit easier for me.
Very, very helpful.
And then Charlinda put in the chat military influencers. They have a Facebook group and a number of different programs and events. Cortez Riggs is a dear friend. He also started his business while he was on active duty. And so he's an incredible mentor, and he's built an incredible community as well.
Mm-hmm. I was also going to add, we have Todd Connor, CEO of Bunker Labs. He has a book coming out next year called Third Shift Entrepreneur, which I absolutely love, because that concept is something that is like the dirty little secret in the military, where if you're trying to start a business or something, for some reason it's this cardinal sin to be an entrepreneur and serving your country, and we need to dispel the fact that this could be somehow wrong, that you can't do both. So you have to know how much that it costs to survive running your business. And that's what a lot of them, they just jump off the cliff, which, I applaud you for jumping off the cliff and building the parachute on the way down. But do you know how much, like mutt sauce, do you know how much mutt sauce that I would have to sell in order to pay for all the bills in the house, take care of my kid, take care of everything? You need to know that number. Because for some people, like Damon John, he said it was $2 million in sales that they have to make a year just to maintain his current lifestyle. And that's why he was working at Red Lobster. So don't shame. If you hear an entrepreneur talking about, I have to work, do not shame that person.
Agreed. Shame on you for shaming if you do. Jonathan, I have there's two questions in here about, first, folks want to see this and share it with other people. So where will these talks come out? And then two, how do they follow GW to attend more of these types of events, or Gen Global?
Yeah. So first of all, our website, I'll put it in the chat, genglobal.org, gives you an idea of all the things that we do. We run a bunch of programs all over the world, but we also have affiliate operations in every part of the world. And the reason I tell you that on this call is because for any of you looking to basically expand, as Hello Alice always tells us, do it through partnerships. Meet people who've got those kinds of networks, and then they can make those introductions. So we have teams in most countries. So as far as Global Entrepreneurship Week is concerned, I didn't hear the first part of the question. I guess I missed it on the chat, but we have it's GEW.co, but you can also get it from our homepage of genglobal.org. It will give you more information. We of course pride ourselves in the fact that just like our partnership with Hello Alice, we have and Bunker Labs, actually, we have lots of resources that are made possible through our partnerships, but of course we've got a lot on our own. Just one I'll throw in, if I can, Elizabeth, just in relation to the last question, is you should all make sure in your community you're familiar if you have a 1 million cups celebration. It's a community event that the Kaufman Foundation does. It's really wonderful for getting peer support. And let me just explain. The newspapers have dubbed it, they once called it Alcoholics Anonymous for Entrepreneurs. Also been called Going to Church for Entrepreneurs, because it happens every week on Wednesday mornings. It's called 1 million cups because it's about you show up for coffee. But bottom line is, I think of it as building a community one entrepreneur at a time. The community comes together, and just basically one or two people like you stand up and say, here's what I'm struggling with. And yes, you wouldn't have your employees there. You don't have to have your spouse there. You can be, but it's a community of people who can go to work with you on your company or ideas. So look up, it's the Kauffman Foundation's initiative. We actually run a globally branded version of it called Startup Huddle, but in the United States, it's called 1 Million Cups. Look it up on the Kauffman Foundation site or look up 1 Million Cups. Just fantastic. It's one of the most successful programs I've seen out there for people getting the kind of support. And I only have one other thing I might just quickly add to say, just be careful of the word advisory board or board. I'm with Elizabeth. Peers are great, but even if they're not peers, think of it as a collection of advisors. The part of the problem with the word board is a lot of people think, oh, they get mixed up with a board of directors who's actually got fiscal, responsibilities of your company. And then also people spend a lot of time having board meetings, and I'm not sure those kinds of things deliver very much. So just a little tip, if you're a really busy entrepreneur and a single mom and you got all these things going on, I mean, I'm thinking one thing you don't want to do is also think about what don't I need to waste my time on. So for example, I have senior advisors. I have 10 of them, okay? And each one of them I picked because I got to know them, I got to trust them. And then I said, will you be a senior advisor? And the reason I did that was because I wanted to know who do I feel 1,000% contacting on demand when I need advice about something there and then. And so I very much think about it. Definitely build a kitchen cabinet, a series of advisors, but don't think that it's got to be anything formal. But and again, the Hello Alice platform is so good at helping you identify those people and work out who you feel comfortable with. But happy to answer any questions about Gen Global if anybody wants to, has them on the chat. So.
Well, I can't believe we're at time. This was an incredible conversation, and I just want to deeply thank Charlinda, Sabrina, Keith, and Jonathan for being authentic and giving great tactical advice. Thank you for your service, and to those of you who have supported those in service, thanks to all of you as well. Please join these organizations. Please apply for the grants that are available and the mentorship. And most of all, talk to each other. I think that's the #1 thing we need right now. Thank you all for your service, and happy Global Entrepreneurship Week. And we'll all talk soon. Thanks, everyone.